Have you spent an entire day getting ready to write and somehow ended the day without writing a single paragraph? Have you spent 4 hours reorganizing your Zotero folders instead of writing? Hey, co-authors. In this episode, we explore one of the most pernicious forms of avoidance, productive procrastination. We discuss how preparation often feels like the responsible, strategic, and committed thing a writer should do, but differentiate where strong preparation becomes a substitute for the difficult work of actually drafting ideas. Let's dive in. So a few years ago, I had a student who was woefully behind on the work they were supposed to do for a class of mine. And week 3 or week 4, I could tell that they were starting to slip up. So I start checking in. Hey, how's things going? Oh, they're fine. Just got a little behind, got a little sick. I'm gonna get caught up. Cool, great. Week 7 or 8. Okay, now you're really behind. What's our plan here? Oh, well, I had X, Y, or Z come up, but I'm on track. Week 10. Now they're starting to panic because they know things are not going to go well. So I have the sort of come to Jesus moment with them. Hey, this is how far behind you are. This is the work that you have to do that's coming up. Here's the work that you haven't done that you still need to do. How are you going to get all this done? And they respond with, don't worry about it. I've started to get organized. Do tell. Like, oh yeah, man, I've got color-coded folders for all of my classes now. I've got an Apple iWatch to give me alarms for whenever I'm doing stuff. I've got notes for my notes, and I'm on top of everything now. Well, okay, I don't think you are, but sure. And lo and behold, week 15 comes by. They have finished maybe a tenth of the work for the class. And we have to have the really hard conversation about how all of the stuff that they had been doing really didn't amount to anything because they weren't actually getting their work done. If this seems familiar to you, it's because I see this all the time with academics. I see this all the time with graduate students, with master students, with PhD students, with faculty. There's this idea that if I can just get organized, that then I can start working on the things they need to work on. But until I get everything exactly so, then I can't do anything. And so to me, whenever I encounter this, I think of it as a form of what I call productive procrastination. That is, it seems like you're doing productive things. You're outlining things. You might be developing a calendar. You might be color coding a bunch of excerpts. You might have a dozen different highlighter colors that you have for your readings that you're doing. You have a minute by minute schedule for whenever you're supposed to do everything from cleaning the dishes to spending 4 hours at the library. But it seems like no matter how much of this that you do, you never get closer to getting the project that you want done. And so that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about this type of productive procrastination, what it is, where it comes from, and ultimately how to overcome it. Okay, so let's dive in.
Are you interested in mastering scholarly writing, developing productivity, and increasing impact, all while staying healthy? Then welcome to the Publishing Academic Research Podcast. My name is Dr. Kyle Ruddick, and I'm a full professor and writing coach who's dedicated to making sure you break through whatever is stopping you from reaching your scholarly goals. I meet so many scholars who have creative, innovative, and daring ideas, but can never seem to get those projects from proposals to print. I want you to get your work in the hands of people who will read it and appreciate it. So let's get into this week's big idea.
So before I get into the various causes and symptoms of productive procrastination, I really want to get into what I think is at the root of this, which is I think that as academics, as scholars, as people who really are invested in this idea of knowing things, we have at our core a deep need for certainty. And that manifests in the type of work that we do, in the precision by which we approach our projects. So whatever type of research you're doing, you are trying to be precise in that, whether in your methodological, theoretical, or practical contributions, you are trying to have a very clearly delineated contribution to the conversation that's unfolding about whatever it is that you're studying. That, as a habit of mind, is one that rests on certainty. And this makes sense, right? As academics, we have the same courses that we might teach every year. We have a schedule in our syllabi that maps out what we're going to teach. We have a academic calendar that our university does not deviate from. Like, there's a lot about our livelihoods that rests on this notion of certainty. But then whenever you get into a writing project, you're all of a sudden confronted with some level of uncertainty. And I think that the earlier of a career scholar that you are, the more uncertainty that you have, right? after 10, 20 years of doing this, you're going to have read so much. You're going to know the people that you need to read. You're going to know the journals that you need to be getting your scholarship from or that you need to be contributing to. Like by that point, you're going to have a pretty good grasp and you're going to have some certainty about all those things. But especially if your early career, all that stuff might seem very much opaque, up in the air to you. And depending on the level of mentorship and information that you are getting or that you got from your doctoral program, you might not have a lot of certainty on all of the steps that it takes to take a project from an idea to publication. And so because we feel this uncertainty, because we feel like we don't have quite as much control over this as we might want, a lot of us rely on engaging in activities that give us an illusion of organization, an illusion of control and certainty, but themselves do not guarantee that the end result of what we're trying to get at will actually come about and that it'll actually be good. And what's, I think, particularly pernicious about this type of procrastination is that all of these activities are things that we need to do. Right? Like it's one thing whenever you say, oh, I need to be writing, but instead I unloaded the dishwasher or folded clothes, or even worse, like just didn't do anything, right? Like I just sat around binge watching Netflix all day. Like, whenever you're procrastinating like that, that's not serving you in trying to get to your goal. And yet this over organization, this over preparation has the semblance of being good for you, which makes it so seductive as a form of not getting things done. So the first problem I would say is the myth of I'll start whenever I'm ready. And a lot of that is because a lot of people think that the only time that they can write is whenever they have complete certainty, complete readiness before they're able to actually put words on the page. And so a lot of people believe that they can organize themselves to a point of readiness, and then that readiness will be self-evident. It will provide this moment of clarity of which you can now see far enough to do all of the writing that they're supposed to do, whatever it is that they want to do, whether that's a chapter or an article or an entire book project. That's usually not how writing works. You rarely will fully have clarity, fully have certainty before you start drafting. Your process will be you drafting for that certainty. With that being said, what are some signs that perhaps you are engaging in a little bit of productive procrastination right now? If you sit down to write, and the first thing that you tell yourself is, well, I can't possibly get any of my writing done until I've answered all of my emails and I have my inbox completely clear. And then you answer all of your emails, and then you're like, oh, well, but like, I need to make sure that they're in the right folders, that I've annotated them the right way, that they're organized properly. Now, that's not to say that you should not answer your emails. Certainly I do. Whenever I sit down to write, that's the first thing I do. I'm usually at Panera. I eat my bowl of soup, because that's what I do every time. And as I do that, I answer emails. And about the time that I'm done eating the soup, it's about the time that I get done answering all the emails. If an email requires more than that, then that is something that I'll have to deal with later. But most emails I can get done in the 10 or 15 minutes that I'm sitting down there and just kind of getting into the groove. But if it takes longer than that, you're procrastinating, right? Getting the emails out of the way so you're not thinking about emails, sure. Continuously tinkering on your emails or putting them all in their right folders or making sure that they're all annotated in the correct way, that's procrastination. On the note of annotating things, if you find yourself annotating or highlighting large tracts of many articles, again, there's a good chance that you are avoiding work. Now, that's not to say that you should not annotate it or that you shouldn't highlight out of articles. But what it is to say is that if you're reading a whole bunch of articles all at once, so if you're reading 5, 6, 7, 10 articles all at once, and you're just going through and doing this heavy annotation, heavy highlighting in each one of those, and you're not transferring any of that knowledge into anything else, you're just going through and highlighting a whole bunch of stuff, article after article, by the time you reach the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th article, you don't remember what happened in article 1. So what do you got to do? Well, I got to go back and read article 1 to figure out what it is that I thought was important out of that. Oh my gosh, look at all of this highlighting. I thought everything was important out of this. Better read it again and parse down how much I highlighted, start tinkering with that, getting rid of some highlighting. Oh, but I missed this. Better highlight that now. And so it just becomes an endless cycle of you going over the same 10 articles again and again because you never move from this idea of annotating. if you find yourself after having dozens of articles, having to make sure that each one is in their proper folder, and well, this one has to be in this folder, but also this one kind of goes in two folders. Do I need to make a copy of that and put it in both places? Or maybe it just really fits in one. Maybe I need to put it in a third folder that kind of bridges the gap between those two folders. Well, if I do that, then I'm going to have an entirely new section. Well, I better start putting some new articles in that. Again, we find ourselves quickly becoming overwhelmed with trying to over-organize this stuff. Overall, what I would say is that if you find yourself engaging in any type of organizing activity, whether that's putting things on cue cards, highlighting, annotating, putting things in folders on your computer, using some sort of helper like Zotero, whatever it is, if you find yourself constantly in a state of doing that type of work, but that work never then gets translated into actual writing, then all of that stuff is on some level becoming a type of procrastination for you. It is important for you to recognize that organization is not an end unto itself. You do not get things organized. You yourself will not be organized. It is not a state of being. Organization is instrumental. It is a means to an end. You organize in order to write. So if you're organizing to the point to where you're not writing, then it's not helping you. You have to break out of the cycle and figure out, how do I start making this organizational scheme really work for me? A lot of scholars, especially early career scholars, have this idea of, I have to get everything organized, I have to get everything ready, I have to be certain in order for me to proceed with my writing. For those folks, they never get any writing done because they're always trying to organize things. The other way that people usually approach writing, and I've talked about this before, is that they write as they're reading, and as a result, their prose is always getting pulled in multiple directions because they don't really have a secure idea of what it is that they're writing about. So it just keeps getting pulled off into various directions with each new thing that they read. The latter is okay insofar as you are writing to understand things, and as long as that type of writing remains as a draft for you as you are working through ideas, that's perfectly appropriate. In fact, you should be working towards this type of ethic where you start from a place not of perfect clarity of what it is that you're going to write about, but instead partial clarity, then drafting, which is going to be messy, and then final clarity, and then final draft. But note, total clarity does not happen at the beginning, nor is your writing that you turn into other people the first draft. Instead, final clarity and final draft come after a process of writing, not come after a process of just organizing. Organizing for the sake of organizing is not productive. It is procrastination. I think a lot of people have this idea that writing with any level of uncertainty, that's a bad thing, that their writing is uncertain writing. It's bad writing. But it's not. Uncertain writing is good as long as it's not your final draft. Uncertain writing should become certain writing because you do the work of revising and editing and clarifying until the prose that you have in your work says the thing that it needs to say in order for it to communicate to your reader what it is that you're trying to get across to them. So, how do we escape this productive procrastination? Well, the first thing to do is to reorient the way that we approach organization. And by that I mean, as I've been saying, organization in itself is not a form of writing. Organization in itself will not get any projects done. Organization in and of itself does nothing for you because organization is a means to an end. If you find yourself spending a whole bunch of time getting organized and very, very little time actually writing, then you're probably doing things wrong. You're probably making this process harder on yourself because you're trying to get to a place of certainty instead of working through the uncertainty as the project unfolds. So, what are some ways then that you can escape this? Well, first off, what I would say and how I approach writing myself is whenever I have a project, like right now I'm writing on a book chapter for a handbook. And the first thing that I did was write kind of a mini abstract of just what I think this project is to me. What's my argument here? What am I trying to convey? Because again, if I can't say in less than 15, 20 seconds what it is that I'm trying to write about, then I probably don't have a good idea of what I'm trying to write. So for me, if I can write something that's 100 words or less, that just really kind of neatly encapsulates what it is that I'm trying to do, that's the first thing that I have to do for myself. is to sit down and just think, okay, 100 words or less, go. What is the problem that I'm identifying here? What kind of framework am I using to address this problem? What do I think is going to be the end result or the conclusion of whatever it is that I'm investigating or arguing for? And then why do I think this matters, right? I'm just trying to write to myself what my argument is. Now, as I go into this writing, that might change. I might do a little bit more reading and go, oh, someone's already made this argument, or someone has thought of this argument and thought it was a stupid argument. And so the thing that I thought was really, really smart actually isn't. 101 reasons why one might, once they get into the actual meat of the reading and everything, that they might change or tweak their idea. That's okay in small doses, right? You don't want to get deep into the project and then change it, and then deep into the project and then change it, right? Like, then you're never going to get things done. But as you, in this initial stage, you've written 100 words or less, and then you're going to start doing some reading, and you're going to start figuring out where the argument that I want to make, the contribution that I want to make, the thing that I want to do, where do I see this thing going? Okay. After that, I sit down and I write out a pithy, funny, or otherwise amusing to myself title for my paper. And you might think to yourself, well, why would you write a title already? But to me, it's, okay, I had an abstract that's 100 words or less about what my contribution is. Now I've got to have a one-sentence title that encapsulates what it is that I'm doing. So all I'm trying to do here is give myself more and more narrow parameters by which I can proceed with my thinking. Because the broader that I make it, the more likely I am to go chasing after things. I don't want to do that. I want to stay focused on the thing that I'm supposed to write about. So now I've got a title. Now I think to myself, okay, now I've got to think of what are going to be my major sections. How's this going to proceed over the course of, in this case, my chapter? So I'm going to have an introduction. I know my introductions are always 4 to 6 paragraphs. Cool. Great. And then I'm going to have, let's say, 4 major sections. And what I should be able to do now is see those 4 major sections to say to myself, okay, if I read the title and the 4 major section headers, could someone reading that have a good idea of what it is they're trying to write about? If so, cool, great. All those things are doing their job. If not, something needs to get tweaked. Something's out of place. Something's not carrying its weight in that line of things. Okay, so now that I've got my 4 sections, what does every section need? They need paragraphs. Now at this point, my draft is starting to look more and more like an outline. So at this point, I've started to do a little bit of reading. And as I'm doing my reading, I'm taking those articles, I'm taking those books, I'm taking those notes, and I write out a page for each one of those sources. And on that page, it will have the verbatim quotes that I might use in my paper. And then after the verbatim quote, I will restate to myself in a sentence or two what I think that quote is trying to say, or otherwise sort of summarize or paraphrase that. Because I want to make sure that I have that in my own words and in my own understanding. Either I have to quote it verbatim in my paper, which excessive quoting looks like you don't know what you're doing, or I might miss something and not do a good job of paraphrasing or summarizing other people's work. Well, I don't want that either. So I have those documents that I've started to develop for my articles. Now, in this case, I give myself a limit of the amount of sources that I can have in each one of those sections. I tell myself 10. Will I have more than that? Eventually, yes. I'll have more than 10 sources per section. That's going to happen. But 10 is a good number for me, because if I do a good job of finding key articles, and if you go back in my podcast, you can look up the episode about finding sources. But if I do a good job of finding my sources, then 10 articles gets me a lot of mileage in terms of knowing what the conversation about this particular issue is. After 10, you start to have diminishing returns. The amount of knowledge that you gain reading 10 articles from 0 to 10 is way more than how much knowledge you're going to gain from reading articles 10 to 20. By the point that you get to 20, you're hearing the same things over and over again, right? You're reaching what we call in qualitative research saturation. You're hearing those themes and repetitions over and over again. That's good. That means that you're doing a good exhaustive literature review. But at this point, we don't want to get to that level of exhaustion yet on our reading. We want to have broad strokes about what it is that we are wanting to argue. Because at this point, what we need to do is figure out what our paragraphs are going to be in each one of those sections. Now that I have my notes from all of the articles, books, everything that I've read, and I have those things in digital form. Now I can start to write an argumentative, declarative topic sentence for each one of the paragraphs. It's going to appear in a section, and then I can put the relevant quotes or my own summary or paraphrasing under that topic sentence for each one of those different paragraphs that I'm going to have in my section. And again, a person should be able to now look at the title of my paper, the section headers, and the topic sentences of what will become my paragraphs, and from that have a pretty strong idea about what it is that I'm going to be writing about. Now that I have all that information together, now I'm at the end point where I can convert all of that information, all those topic sentences, all the headers into actual prose. I can write that out. And if you go back into, again, the previous podcast episode about writing good paragraphs, I go through the process of how to create a strong paragraph based on this information. What's important for this particular episode is to note that the organization that you were doing, finding those sources and making notes from those sources, was not a matter of Pokemon where it's, I've got to collect them all. I got to get all the articles. I got to get all the quotes. I got to get all the whatevers. Instead, it was very, very instrumental. I have a project. That project has a purpose. That purpose is known in both that 100-word or less abstract and in the title. Through my sections, I have paragraphs. Those paragraphs need to be populated with information from previous scholars. That's where the information that I am reading, notating, annotating, highlighting, putting on note cards or whatever, that's where that information lives and resides. It's instrumental. All of that work is done in service of it getting on the page. If it's not eventually making its way to the page, then you might be procrastinating by over-preparing your work. What's important here is to recognize that you are going to start with ugly paragraphs, bullet points, partial arguments, because all of this is a form of exploratory writing where you're going back and forth on the things that you're reading and the things that you're writing. And again, all of that's okay because this is not going to be your first draft, right? All of this is draft 1 of what will become draft 2, 3, 4 until it gets to a place where other people can read it. But you're working through them in a way that puts it as close as possible to what your final project is going to be, which is you actually writing words on the page, you keeping them in a Google Drive folder, you keeping them on note cards, you keeping them in a binder full of articles that you've highlighted. If that's where your organization is ending, then that organization is not serving you and serving your writing. So as I end, one thing that I will say is that one of the seductions, I think, of this type of productive procrastination is that it provides a form of concrete productivity that you can tell other people that seems impressive and good and that you're working real hard and that you're in the coal mine of ideas and really struggling to make sense of things in a way that shows your intellectual labor. And so you'll go to departmental parties and they'll be like, oh, well, how's your dissertation coming? Well, I've got 400 note cards with individual quotes on them. Or you'll go to a departmental meeting. Hey, how's that article coming along? Ah, well, I've got 600 articles that I've downloaded into a Google folder, or whatever it might be. All those things sound very impressive, and people will ooh and ah, their eyes will go wide, and they'll act impressed, and maybe they even are impressed. But the most impressive thing, the honest to God most impressive thing, is you getting done. That's going to be the most impressive because it doesn't matter if you had 1,000 note cards or whatever. At the end of the day, nothing matters except you putting words on the page and then revising those words to a place to where they make sense to your reader, where they contribute to a conversation, and if they get published, where your dissertation or your thesis gets finished and you get to graduate. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is a mirage meant to take you off the path of those things. And so really start thinking to yourself, is the way that I'm approaching my organization, is it helping me get things done? Or do I just feel like it gives me a sense of certainty and control in an otherwise uncertain and anxiety-ridden process? In which case, if it's the latter, then you need to reassess that and start to reorient your organization to make sure that it is concretely flowing into your writing process. So I think that's going to about wrap it up for me, folks. As always, I appreciate you all listening. I hope that this episode is helpful for you as you're wrapping up your semester. Certainly, the last couple of weeks of a semester is the time whenever all the procrastination chickens come home to roost. So hopefully that's not the case with you. You've been staying on top of things. This podcast has been completely useless to you because you're so on top of everything. But if, perhaps, just maybe, if you were a little bit procrastinating and that now you've got a little bit more work than you thought, just know that everyone struggles with procrastination a little bit and that you're not alone, and that for many of us, whether you're a student submitting your work to a professor or you're a professor who's procrastinated and now you're behind on a revision for an article or a due date for a textbook revision or whatever it might be, just know that everyone gets a little bit behind sometimes. Forgive yourself. Don't beat yourself up too much about it. Figure out the thing that's blocking you and then start to build the habits for yourself. So that way, not only can you finish this project, but that you are successful for other projects yet to come. And if you need a little help with that, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to talk with folks about the process that they're going through. The first consultation, which is 30 minutes, is always free. So whether that leads to you wanting to use my coaching services, or you just want to chill out and talk through some stuff that you're going through right now, and you just want for 30 minutes to vent to someone or talk through some ideas or whatever it might be, hey, I'm here for you. I want to make sure that you're being successful because I know that you've got great ideas. I know that you're going to do great things. And so I want to make sure that your work gets into the hands of the people who are going to read it and cite it and appreciate it. Okay? So thank you so much, and I'll see you in next week's episode.
Hey, co-authors, what's stopping your best ideas from becoming your next big publication? Brilliant research shouldn't die in your drafts folder. Now's the time to bridge the gap between the possible and the published. You can support this podcast by subscribing to it, leaving a positive review, assigning it to your classes, or sharing it with a colleague. Let me know what I can do to make this the best podcast resource for you. And if you'd like to know more about my writing coach services, then you can find my information in the podcast description and set up an appointment. I'll be back next week with another episode. But until then, keep healthy, keep writing, and don't let reviewer 2 get you down.